The Anchorage summit ended with smiles, cameras, and red carpets, but without real agreements. Trump called it productive, Putin called it necessary, and the truth is that there was no ceasefire, no roadmap, only images designed for domestic audiences. Held at Elmendorf-Richardson Base in Alaska, a symbolic site is the closest U.S. territory to Russia. This was the first direct meeting between both leaders since the escalation in Ukraine, with an ambitious agenda that included European security, arms control, and Arctic cooperation, though expectations quickly shrank. The question was no longer, will there be peace, but will they at least keep talking? The talks lasted 3 hours, described as constructive and respectful, but without details or commitments. Reuters mentioned a proposal for a partial freeze of fighting in eastern Ukraine, but U.S. officials clarified these were only exploratory ideas. In other words, trial balloons, not binding deals. What did emerge was narrative. CNN described it as a moment of statesmanship. Fox News portrayed Trump as the man of peace. And in Russia, the footage of Putin walking down a red carpet on American soil was replayed endlessly. As the Washington Post noted, Anchorage was less about negotiation and more about controlling the storyline, and each leader walked away with something. Putin, prestige without concessions. Trump, the optics of peacemaking. For the Kremlin, long under sanctions and painted as a pariah, the image of its president being welcomed at a U.S. military base was enough to declare that Russia is no longer isolated. In Russian politics, optics weigh as much as outcomes, and for a domestic audience fed by television, seeing their leader treated as an equal on U.S. soil was a massive psychological victory. For Trump, the calculation was different. Project himself as the only one bold enough to speak with Putin, appear before the cameras as the leader seeking peace. With carefully ambiguous lines like, "Ukraine has to agree," he managed to sound bold without committing, a strategy that allows him to tell his base he is working for peace, suggest to Moscow he is open to creative options, and shield himself from critics by claiming nothing happens without Kiev. But that ambiguity carries risks. In Berlin and Warsaw, there are already fears that Washington could trade territory for a fragile truce, and in Kiev, the mood was bitter, because decisions about Ukraine were made without Ukraine present, something Zelensky calls an existential threat. For Ukrainians under bombardment, watching leaders smile in Alaska while nothing changes on the ground breeds only frustration and mistrust, and exclusion erodes morale as much as confidence in allies. Europe, meanwhile, emerged divided. Poland and the Baltics fear hidden concessions. Germany and France preferred dialogue over silence, and that contrast reveals fractures in NATO that Putin will know how to exploit. To recap, Putin gained prestige, Trump secured optics, Ukraine lost a voice, and Europe showed division. The problem is that Anchorage did not reduce tensions. Russian missiles remain in place, NATO jets remain on alert, and history shows that a miscalculation, like in 1983, can spiral into catastrophe. The real test will come soon. Trump will meet Zelensky in Washington, and there we will see if Ukraine regains agency or is relegated to a bargaining chip. Moscow may choose to pause and savor the symbolic win, or escalate to test how serious Washington is about turning words into action. In Europe, capitals continue debating what Anchorage means. Too much flexibility from the U.S. will push Poland and the Baltics toward independent security, while too much toughness will deepen rifts with Germany and France. In the U.S., Congress is split. Republicans praise Trump for opening dialogue. Democrats accuse him of legitimizing Putin without extracting concessions. The Pentagon remains cautious. Photos do not erase the reality of Russian missile brigades targeting Europe. That is why Anchorage is not an endpoint, but a pivot point. The coming months will determine whether it opens a fragile path to peace or triggers new escalation. The only certainty is that the summit produced no treaties, no ceasefire, no commitments, only photos and narratives. Putin on a red carpet, Trump at the microphone, and Ukraine outside the room. For Moscow, that was enough to claim victory. For Trump, enough to appear presidential. For Europe, a source of unease. For Ukraine, Another painful reminder of decisions made by others, and the unavoidable question remains, were we witnessing real diplomacy or merely a carefully staged geopolitical show?